Eleanor Vance was the perfect neighbor in Vermont, but her lonely death on the bathroom floor revealed something that neither the police nor her children could have imagined. What was hidden beneath the floorboards transformed a family's grief into a pact of crime and silence. Discover the dark secret a mother took to her grave to protect her children, but which ended up destroying their souls. Approach me. Do not be afraid of my tired voice, for it is the only thing left of the woman everyone in Vermont called the Iron Lady. You, listening to me now, might see yourself in me. Perhaps you are also that person who says I'm fine while the world collapses around you. But listen carefully to what I have to say, because my "I'm fine" was the greatest lie ever told in this town, and the price my children paid for it was far too high. My name is Eleanor Vance. I lived 76 years under the gray New England sky, and I died exactly as I planned, without anyone holding my hand. You might think this is an act of courage, a proof of love, so as not to be a burden to one's children. But I am here to tell you that behind that facade of a dedicated and independent mother, there was a secret as dark as the basement of our old farmhouse. My 3 children, Mark, a brilliant lawyer in Boston, Susan, a renowned doctor, and little David, always looked at me with a mixture of pride and guilt. Mom never needs anything, they would say at Thanksgiving dinners. They traveled from afar, brought expensive gifts, but I never allowed them to stay more than 2 days. I would shoo them away with smiles and apple pies, saying I had my own life. What they didn't know was that every minute they spent in that house was a risk to me. It wasn't just the cancer eating away at my bones, which I hid in fake vitamin bottles. It was something much deeper. The truth is, I robbed them. I robbed them of the chance to be human. I robbed them of their right to forgive me. And above all, I robbed them of the secret their father, Thomas, left behind the night he vanished 30 years ago. Everything began to fall apart 6 months ago. The doctor in Burlington gave me the verdict. Eleanor, you have months. The treatment will be painful. Call your children. I looked at him with the same icy stare I had used to face Vermont winters for decades and replied, I am not a burden, doctor. I am the foundation, and foundations do not shake. I left the office and burned the test results in the fireplace. That night, Mark called me. I could hear the Boston traffic in the background. Mom, you sound out of breath. Is everything okay? I gripped the phone tightly, feeling a stab of pain in my chest, and smiled at the void. It's just the gardening fatigue, dear. Go to work. The world needs lawyers, not nurses for old women. I felt pleasure in that manipulation. I felt powerful being the silent martyr. But the tension increased every day. I spent the nights crawling through the hallways, biting the pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear my screams. I saw the shadow of my antagonist every day in the mirror. It wasn't the disease. It was my own pride. And then there was Mr. Henderson, my neighbor, who grew suspicious. He saw me fall in the garden and tried to call Susan. I threatened him. I told him if he spoke a word, I would reveal what I knew about his gambling debts. I was willing to do anything to die alone. Why? Because I knew that if Susan, with her doctor's eyes, spent even one night caring for me, she would realize the pills I was taking weren't for blood pressure. She would start going through my things. And if she reached the back of the oak cabinet, she would find the key. The key that opens the metal box Thomas handed me before he was taken by the storm. The escalation of my physical pain was merely a reflection of the escalation of my fear. On one stormy night, the Vermont cold seemed to have entered my soul. I tried to reach the bathroom. The tile floor felt like an ocean of ice. My legs, those that had carried my children and walked miles to save bus money, simply gave up. I fell. The sound of my skull hitting the sink echoed like a gunshot. And there, lying on the cold floor, looking at the ceiling I had painted myself to hide the leaks, I had my first clear vision. I saw my children arriving for my funeral. I saw the relief on their faces because I hadn't given them trouble. But I saw something worse. The emptiness of not having had a real goodbye. But the emotional climax wasn't my death. It was what happened minutes before I faded out. The phone rang. It was David, my youngest. He wanted to say he'd been promoted. I couldn't reach the device. I heard his voice on the answering machine. Mom, I know you're sleeping, you stubborn woman. Just wanted to say I love you, and next week I'm coming over to take you to dinner. Don't take no for an answer. I died hearing that promise that would never be fulfilled. And I died knowing that beneath the loose floorboard where my hand was stretched out lay the proof that their father didn't die in an accident. I killed him. I killed him to protect them from his monstrosity, and I spent 30 years pretending to be an independent saint, so they would never have to question where the college money came from. My end was not a victory. It was a cowardly liberation. I left them the fortune, the house, and a confession letter they would find in 3 days. I spared them the work of caring for a sick person, but I condemned them to the eternal work of carrying my crime. Do you understand now? Love that does not accept help is a love that also does not know how to give itself. I was not a heroine. I was an island surrounded by a sea of lies, and the Vermont ice finally claimed me. That was a strong opening, wasn't it? Eleanor wasn't just a proud mother. She was a guardian of dangerous secrets. Let's now dive into the past and understand how this web of lies began to be woven in the icy fields of the United States. You need to understand what life was like in Vermont in the 90s. Thomas, my husband, was the most charming man in town, but behind those flannel shirts and commercial smile, there was a monster that devoured everything it touched. He wasn't just a gambler. He was a man willing to sell his own soul and our children's future to pay debts to people who don't accept "I'm sorry" as payment. On that winter night 30 years ago, he came home with bloodshot eyes. He wanted the deed to the farm. He wanted to take the roof from Mark, Susan, and David to save his own skin. "They'll manage, Eleanor. They're young. They can start over," he screamed. In that moment, something inside me, that motherly fiber you all praise, turned into cold steel. I wouldn't leave my children on the street. When he lunged to grab the documents from the wall safe, the accident happened. Or rather, the accident I manufactured. A struggle, a push, and the cellar ice took care of the rest. I buried his body and my soul along with it. The next day, I told everyone he had run off to Canada with a mistress. The police searched, but Thomas had so many enemies that no one was surprised by his disappearance. What no one knew was that he was carrying a briefcase. A briefcase full of cash, dirty money from a cargo embezzlement scheme at the Boston port. It was with that money that I paid for the best colleges for Mark and Susan. It was with that money that I created the facade of an empire that allowed me to be the independent woman. But dirty money has a scent that doesn't wash off, even after decades. For 30 years, I lived in fear that someone would knock on my door asking for what belonged to Thomas. That's why I became this fortress. I didn't let anyone in, not because I didn't love my children, but because every long hug was a chance for them to smell the fear on my skin. When the cancer arrived, I saw it as an executioner, but also as an accomplice. If I died quickly, in silence, the secret would die with me. I planned every detail of my terminal independence. I bought supplies for months so I wouldn't have to go to the market. I wore heavy makeup during the rare times I video called Susan to hide my cadaverous pallor. "You look radiant, Mom," she would say from her climate-controlled office in Chicago. Little did she know I was wearing a corset to keep my spine straight while the metastases devoured me from within. The tension was constant. I felt Thomas was there, in the basement, laughing at my attempt to be a saint. With every pain I felt on the bathroom floor, I thought, this is the price. A penny of pain for every dollar I stole to give them a future. I was paying my debt to the universe, but I was committing a new crime. I was dying without letting them love me in my weakness. 3 days. It took 3 days of absolute silence on the phone for worry to overcome their respect for my space. Mark was the first to arrive. His black SUV cut through the high snow of the private road, parking haphazardly in front of the porch. He still had the spare key I had tried, several times, to ask back for. When he opened the door, the house's heat was still on, but the air was heavy, thick with the metallic smell of death and rotting flowers. "Mom?" he called. His voice, accustomed to echoing in courtrooms, trembled. He found me in the bathroom. I was just a shadow fallen on the white tile, now stained by a destiny I had written myself. He didn't scream immediately. He fell to his knees. The cold, calculating Boston lawyer disappeared, replaced by the boy who used to hide behind my skirts during thunderstorms. Within hours, Susan and David arrived. The house I had kept in deathly silence for decades now swarmed with the sound of sobs, hurried footsteps of forensic experts, and the sound of breaking hearts. Susan, as a doctor, was the first to notice the inconsistencies. While cleaning out my room, she found what I call the Museum of Pain. Behind my silk dresses, in a false bottom, were the empty morphine boxes, the blood-stained sheets I washed by hand in the middle of the night to leave no trace, and the symptom diary I hid. "She's been dying for months," Susan said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Why didn't she call me? I'm a doctor. I could have given her comfort. Why did she treat us like strangers?" Resentment began to mix with the grief. They felt rejected. What I planned as an act of love, so as not to bother them, was being received as an insult to their loyalty. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I served pies, and looked at each other with a silent question. Who was this woman who raised us, really? But the true earthquake happened when David, in a fit of rage and grief, kicked the loose board in the hallway near where I died. He wanted to take his pain out on something solid. But what he heard wasn't the sound of hollow wood. It was the sound of metal hitting metal. They looked at each other. Mark, with the instinct of someone who deals with crime, grabbed a crowbar from the garage. As the snow fell outside, isolating the house from the rest of the world, they pried open the floor. What they found wasn't just Thomas's briefcase with the rest of the dirty money I never had the courage to spend. They found the confession diary. I wrote that diary to be read only when I could no longer be arrested. In it, I told of the accident in the basement. I told how I turned the death of a cruel man into the fuel for their successful lives. I told them that every diploma on the wall, every luxury car in their garage had been baptized with the blood of a secret I carried alone on the bathroom floor. The reaction was emotional chaos. Mark wanted to burn it all. Susan wanted to call the police and exhume the basement. And David, my sweet David, just held a photo of me and cried, realizing the mother he idolized never truly existed. She was a construct, a character who died so the truth wouldn't live. The atmosphere inside that Vermont house is now colder than the blizzard raging outside. The silence I cultivated for 30 years has been replaced by a truth that burns like acid. My children are no longer just mourning a mother. They are in a moral courtroom where I am the defendant, and the verdict could destroy all their lives. From where I am now, I see what my love caused. Mark, the lawyer who always defended the law above all, held the metal briefcase as if it were a bomb about to explode. He looked at the old dollar bills, at Thomas's records, and at my letter. The conflict in his eyes was brutal. If he turned in that briefcase, his career would be over. The Vance name would be dragged through the mud. The fortune that funded the luxury office in Boston would be revealed as the fruit of a crime and silent money laundering. "She turned us into accomplices," Mark whispered, his voice laced with a venom I never thought he would have for me. "Without asking, without giving us a choice, she bought us a future with the silence of a corpse." Susan, the doctor who swore to save lives, was in shock. She paced the kitchen, her hands shaking. What tortured her wasn't just the crime from 30 years ago, but the discovery of my illness. She grabbed the morphine bottles I had hidden and threw them against the wall. The sound of breaking glass was like my own heart shattering. "I could have eased her pain," Susan screamed at the empty walls. "She preferred to die on the floor, alone, like an animal, just to make sure we didn't find out she was a killer. What kind of mother does that? What kind of love is it that prefers the solitude of death over the comfort of a daughter's hug?" The theft I committed became clear in that moment. I didn't just steal their right to know who their father was. I stole their humanity. I forced them to be perfect while I carried the rot. And now, with my death, I dumped all that rot into their laps. David, the youngest, went to the basement. He took a flashlight and the crowbar. I saw him descend the wooden steps that creaked under his weight. He went to the corner where the earth looked different, where the cement was newer. He began to dig. He needed to see. He needed to know if the monster I described in the letter was real or if I had gone mad in my solitude. While he dug, Mark and Susan argued upstairs. "We have to report it, Susan. It's a body. It's a crime," Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. "And lose everything, Mark?" Susan shot back, with a hardness she inherited from me. "If this comes out, your office closes. My medical license will be questioned. David loses the company. She planned this. She died alone so we would never have to care for her, and thus, we never had the chance to make her confess while there was still time to make things right." The tension rose to an unbearable point. They realized I had cornered them. If they forgave me, they became criminals. If they reported me, they destroyed themselves. I, Eleanor Vance, had created the perfect trap under the guise of being a hero mother. Downstairs, David's metal struck something that wasn't stone. The scream he let out, a high-pitched sound of pure horror and despair, echoed through the house's ventilation ducts, paralyzing Mark and Susan. Thomas's past was no longer just on paper. It was there, present, claiming its price. David's scream was the sound of our glass perfection shattering forever. Mark and Susan descended the basement stairs as if entering a tomb, and in a way they were. The light from David's flashlight trembled, illuminating what remained of Thomas Vance. It wasn't just a skeleton. It was proof that the life of luxury, the private schools, and the prestige were built on a grave. There, in the damp, cold air of the basement, my 3 children looked at each other. The hero mother mask I had worn for decades had fallen, revealing a woman capable of killing and hiding to maintain control. Susan was the first to break the silence. She was no longer crying. Her eyes had the same metallic glint mine had 30 years ago. "If we call the police now, the story won't be about how Thomas was a monster," Susan said, her voice cutting like Vermont ice. "It will be about how Dr. Susan Vance, lawyer Mark Vance, and businessman David Vance lived off the proceeds of a crime. Our reputations, our lives. Everything Mom built turns to ash in 5 minutes." Mark looked at the briefcase with the dirty money, and then at what was left of his father. His moral conflict was being devoured by the instinct for survival. I knew them well. I raised them to be winners, to never accept defeat, to be, above all, independent of any judgment. I raised them in my own image. "She gave us everything," David murmured, his hands stained with earth. "But she also took our souls. She died in that bathroom knowing we were going to find this. She gave us the final choice, be heirs to a secret or the ashes of the truth." Then, the unexpected happened. Mark, the man of the law, took the crowbar from David's hands. He didn't call the police. He didn't call for help. He began to shovel the dirt back into the hole. "Mom wanted to die without giving trouble, didn't she?" Mark said, with a bitter smile that gave me chills, even in the afterlife. "Well then, let's give her what she wanted. Let's bury this here, along with her memory. The world will keep knowing Eleanor Vance as a saint who died alone out of pride, and we will carry this weight because it's the price she paid for our freedom." They made a pact of silence right there. Susan took the diaries and the morphine bottles to the living room fireplace. David cleaned the basement, sealing the cement with cold precision. That night, they burned all the evidence that I was a killer and that I was sick. The flames consumed my sins, but the ashes entered their lungs. The theft was complete. I stole their honesty. I turned them into heirs of a crime, forcing them to maintain the lie to protect themselves. They thought they were protecting my memory, but I knew the truth. I had handcuffed them to my legacy forever. They could never fully hate me, nor fully love me. As the smoke rose through the chimney and mixed with the blizzard outside, Mark poured 3 shots of whiskey. They toasted to a mother who never existed. They were now the guardians of Vermont, the new owners of a secret that would unite them through fear and separate them through remorse. I won. But looking at the hardened face of my youngest, I realized my victory had the bitter taste of the cold floor where I took my last breath. The day of my funeral was a morning of pale, cruel sun, the kind that shines on Vermont snow but warms nothing. The church was packed. Neighbors, former clients of my small garment business, the mayor, and even Mr. Henderson, who still looked at me with suspicion, were there. Everyone mourned the loss of the Iron Lady, the mother who sacrificed herself until her last breath so as not to be a burden. I saw my 3 children sitting in the front pew. They were impeccable. Mark, in his Italian suit, kept the rigid posture of a guardian. Susan, with a black veil hiding the tired eyes of someone who spent the night burning papers. And David, my sweet David, who seemed to have aged 10 years in 3 days. The priest spoke of altruistic love and humility in suffering. What divine irony! If he knew that beneath the soil of that house, which would now be sold, lay the mortal remains of Thomas and the moral integrity of 3 human beings, he would have dropped the crucifix. My children were not crying because they missed me. They were crying because they were trapped. After the burial, they returned to the house one last time. The silence was so dense, you could hear the wood creaking under the effect of the frost. They couldn't stay in the same room for long. The pact of silence they made in the basement had created an invisible barrier between them. Susan couldn't look at Mark without remembering he suggested hiding a corpse. Mark couldn't look at David without seeing the fear that the more fragile brother might crack in a therapy session 10 years from now. "We are going to sell the property," Mark announced, without looking at his siblings. "We will donate the house's value to a cancer hospital, a gesture of charity in Mom's name. It's what the public expects of us." They were scrubbing the trail, laundering the blood money with the holy water of philanthropy. It was in that moment that the realization hit them. I didn't die alone in the bathroom out of love. I died there because it was the only place where I could still exercise absolute control. If I had died in a hospital, surrounded by them, under the effect of sedatives, I might have drifted. I might have confessed. I might have cried and asked for forgiveness, and forgiveness requires the truth. But the truth was too heavy for my vanity. I robbed them of the opportunity to see me as I was, a flawed, frightened, and sinful woman. I condemned them to live the rest of their lives pretending they had the perfect mother, while carrying the weight of knowing they are the children of a killer. Not giving trouble cost them their peace of mind. Every time Mark looks in the mirror before entering a courtroom, he will see the man who buried the law in his own basement. Every time Susan saves a life, she will remember the life her mother took and the life she herself helped to hide. The message I leave for you, who still breathe and who perhaps have the same pride I had, is this: do not die on a desert island. Love is not just what you give. Love is primarily what you allow yourself to receive. When you hide your pain, your illness, or your mistakes from your children to protect them, you are actually saying you don't trust their ability to love you in your entirety. You are stealing from them the right to be your caregivers, your confessors, and your friends. I thought I was a heroine for dying on the cold floor of a Vermont bathroom. But today, seeing my children scatter across the cemetery parking lot, each heading to a different city, never able to hug each other again without smelling the basement dirt, I realize my defeat. My independence was my greatest crime. My secret was my most cursed inheritance. And the loneliness I chose in life is now the loneliness they will carry forever. I wanted to be remembered as a rock, but rocks do not love and are not loved. They only weigh heavy, and I will weigh on the backs of my children until the last of them joins me in the silence of the earth. Do not do as I did. Do not let your last thought be one of pride for not having bothered anyone. Let your last thought be the touch of a loved one's hand, the sound of an "I forgive you," and the lightness of one who has nothing left to hide. The truth hurts, but silence kills long after the heart stops beating. Did this story touch your heart? Sometimes, what we think is protection is just a barrier to true love. If you believe that truth and mutual care are the foundation of a family, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Comment below. Which city are you watching us from? Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing powerful reflections like Eleanor Vance's.